Welcome to A Date with Darkness podcast, where I will be discussing the impact of hurtful and abusive relationships and how to overcome them so that you can move through your pain and get to the kind of healthy relationships you want, need, and deserve. I'm Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed psychotherapist based in California. While I hope that you find this podcast educational and informational, please note it should not be substituted for treatment with a licensed mental health professional. Also, due to the nature of the podcast, some of the information presented on the show can be sensitive to some of my listeners, so please note that listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to today's show. I'm so happy to have you here. And today's show is going to be a very different kind of episode than normally what I do. On today's show, we are going to be talking about the infamous T.I., the rapper's incident that took place earlier this week, or went viral, I should say, earlier this week. Just to kind of give you some background, he was on a podcast called Ladies Like Us, and he had made a comment that he takes his daughter to the OBGYN and regularly every year and he has a doctor confirm her virginity by checking her hymen. And there was a lot of backlash from that show, and we'll get more into it later. But the ladies who hosted the show were kind of laughing and kind of went along with what he was saying. And since the backlash, the episode has been deleted and taken down. But there was a major outcry, and I had a reaction. A lot of therapists in my community and just people that I know in general had a very strong reaction to this, and this made national news. So I wanted to come up here and talk about it just from my viewpoint with a colleague of mine who is a licensed sex therapist. And I wanted to bring awareness to this issue because while I think that T.I. got some of the backlash from it, I don't think that he is alone in his thinking this way. And I also wanted to be cognizant of his daughter, who I do think has gotten unwarranted and unnecessary attention from this issue, for negative attention specifically. And I wanted to definitely do a show where I was respectful of her, but I also wanted to address the issue in general because I do believe that it points to a bigger problem in society, and we do get into that on the show. And so I really would love to hear what your thoughts are, but let's dive right into it. I have Dr. Donna Oriowo on the show, and she's going to be my guest, co-hosting with me and talking about this topic. And so without further ado, here's our talk together. Hello, Dr. Donna. How are you?
I am doing all right.
Awesome. Well, thank you for agreeing to come on the show at such late notice. I appreciate having you on here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Good. And I just want to prep the audience. You're probably going to come on twice. I'm going to extend another invitation to you about a different topic, but we had to have you on here to talk about a hot topic that just started popping off this week. But before we get into it, can you please tell us about yourself, what you do, and what drives the passion behind your work?
All right. I am Dr. Donna Oriowo. I'm a sex and relationship therapist. Specifically, I tend to focus on colorism and texturism and how those things impact mental and sexual health. But this week, I've been mostly focused on T.I.
Okay. All right. And since you brought it up, let's jump right into it. So tell us a little bit about what popped off with the rap artist T.I. this week. Can you just set it up for us?
Well, apparently he was on a podcast or a radio show, And while he was there, he made mention that he takes his daughter to the gynecologist, which is not a problem, but that he has the gynecologist check for her hymen to ensure her purity. I'm not sure how long it's been going on or how long he plans on doing it. But I had a visceral negative reaction when I heard that. And the other part of the interview that I heard, or I had been reading some of the articles about it, was also about how he owns half of his wife's vagina. Yeah.
Okay, so let's pick this apart. And I do want to preempt this podcast by saying that, I'm not a fan or foe of T.I., or his music or anything. So he's not like, one of these people that I love or hate. I've heard his music way back when, but I also do want to say that, I'm not a fan of what's popped off in the media about him this week, but I do want to be and am most concerned about his daughter. And I want to try to honor that without causing her any more disrespect or embarrassment. So I know that a lot of people have said a lot of things, and it's opened up a lot of doors towards her. And I'm sure that this may have caused her some unnecessary trauma already. Just from what I hear, she shut down her social media accounts.
I would imagine so.
Yeah, so I think my point of doing this show with you today, first and foremost, is my concern for her, as well as that child's mother, because that was something for me. I didn't hear her mother's voice when all this kind of popped off. It was just more like, this is me, this is what I do, and this is why I do it. Which for me, it kind of stuck out as being controlling, amongst a lot of other things. And so I was really, that was kind of what stuck out for me. But I want you to kind of share your thoughts. Let's pick this apart. So this father, Black father, is saying that he takes his daughter to the OBGYN every year, which, by the way, I'll definitely post the blog and things like that in the show notes. But his daughter is 18.
Yeah.
So she's technically an adult.
She's a whole adult. And medically has been able to go to the gynecologist without her father for a couple of years at the very least. And I personally didn't see any problem with him going to the gynecologist with her. I feel like this helps to normalize that this is a regular thing that you should be doing to make sure that all of your systems are in healthy operation. I also like that it is cross-gender, for those who are still on the gender binary. But this idea that a father is taking their daughter to the gynecologist, I think that needs to be normalized.
Yes.
We need to talk about men being involved in women's sexual health and health in general.
Absolutely.
Not be unaware.
Absolutely. So I also am in agreement with you, and I applaud that he's very involved in terms of his daughter's health and just being involved as a parent in general. I think that's great. I think that's wonderful that her father is doing that for her. So you get kudo points. He gets kudo points for that.
Yeah.
So
a small pat on the back before you want to smack him upside the head. Honestly, after that point, it gets appalling. Right? Because whether or not, and some people have stated on social media that, oh, he was joking. Y'all need to calm down. I'm like, well, these kinds of jokes that are based in women's oppression are not funny.
Okay. So let's pick this apart.
Let's
pick this apart. Let's talk about where we feel like the issue went left first.
Where it went left first is that my initial thought was, did he have her consent to put her business in the street?
And that's one of the reasons why I was a little bit hesitant to do this podcast, because I'm like, there is even though she's 18 in my eyes, she's still a young adult. And, she doesn't have that platform for her voice. And that was part of my concern, even with just me doing this show. I'm like, okay, I don't want to disrespect her, but I want to make sure that she has a platform for a voice. And I have to agree with you. He had that platform and he put her out there, and I don't know if she gave consent for her to put it all out there like that.
Now, I would definitely say she has a voice.
Yes.
She is the daughter of a famous rapper.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So she can certainly speak out against or for whatever works best for her.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, his sharing and very heavily involved her life. And I don't know that he thought about what the possible consequences, number one, to what he was saying was, but number two, the consequences for her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And did he ask whether or not it was okay for him to put this piece of her life into the public sphere?
Yeah.
Now, when you keep it between y'all, you keep it between y'all. That's your thing. If she's okay or not okay with it, that's between them. That's for them to discuss.
Yes. And speaking on her virginity, as just checking to ensure the virginity, again, that's something that you're putting out there across all platforms, which she may be comfortable with knowing. But when you have a man that's saying, I'm checking to ensure, the alarm bell started going off for me, because that's the first thing that, predators look for. That's like open season.
I am so happy that you are not even the only person to have said this.
It's like
because
open
I also
season.
Saw it. I made a list of 10 items that I thought was just wrong, because I could only go to 10. I didn't have all day. And that was one of the items on the list. That
what were you thinking?
You are alerting every child trafficker, predator, whoever might have wanted to get to her. You're now alerting her that now you made it a game. I can get T.I.'s daughter. And so for someone, especially for people with already ill intent, it's like, okay, I can get her. Maybe I can sell this virginity. Maybe I can take this virginity, and I'll be able to say that I took the thing that T.I. wanted to maintain.
Well, and that's kind of what comes up for me, and I want to tread very lightly here, because I want to be politically as correct as possible, but also speak to the truth, because I do work with people who are sexual predators, in addition to the work that I do here. And so when you're saying that you're having her checked, to make sure that those things are the way you think they should be, it's almost like saying, I'm the man that has control over her body, or I want that piece of control and that ownership, right? And so that she can't make decisions for herself, so that it takes ownership of her body away from her. But it also, I feel like it's pushing you in the direction to where you can't go to your parents to have those sexual discussions. So although he put it out there like, I'm a concerned father and I'm going with her to the OB, it's also saying,
I have these conversations with
right. It's saying that we're not having these conversations, because is she getting also training on how to have sex, or how to pick an adequate sexual partner, and how to advocate for her needs?
Or is it just that she's supposed to say no? So basically her choice in all of this seems already diminished. And to be quite honest, even to hear someone talk about it in the way that it was spoken about, it seemed like a power play. Like, I have control over the women in my household. See how I have control? I check her to make sure that her virginity is intact, because it had better be intact, because I told her no.
Mm-hmm.
So then, and I think that sometimes we forget the consent, like even beyond having her consent to even share this information on the interwebs. Did he have consent to, is he taking away her ability to consent? So consent is not just saying no, it's also the ability to say yes enthusiastically. So is he sort of curbing what she might want for herself because he has already chosen for her?
Mm-hmm.
And that furthermore, this checking is almost as though he's saying that your value lies in your vagina and in your virginity. And if you should besmirch yourself by having sex with someone, by having vaginal sex, I also want to be clear on that, that you would now have lowered your value and that you are nothing without this virginity.
Absolutely. And along with that, Dr. Donna, was my concern that there seemed to be a double standard for the son.
Yeah.
Who had been, sexually active since 13 or 14, and that was considered to be okay. So there's mixed messages.
There's often this idea that if boys should have sex at a young age, they are the man. Look at them. People want them. And if a young girl should do the same, she is fast. Look at her. And I often wonder, who is it that people want their sons to have sex with? If the girls are as chaste, because everyone is definitely coming from a very heterosexual mindset. They're definitely not wanting their children to be gay because apparently it's the worst thing that could happen. But beyond that piece, who are these boys having sex with if all the girls are supposed to be so chaste? If they're all supposed to be maintaining this virginity?
Absolutely.
And quite honestly, considering T.I.'s own philandering ways, alleged philandering ways, it seems more than anything that he was trying to protect her from the type of man he is and what he is raising his sons to be.
When in all actuality, he might actually be having the opposite effect. Because the more you tell someone no, psychologically,
the more they say yes.
Yes, right? And when you get that taste of freedom, and I'm not saying
do what you want.
but not only you're going to do what you want, but you might actually go a little bit wild. It's kind of like the first time you had ice cream, right? It's like, oh man, I'm going to eat it up. I'm going to swim in it.
Let me tell you, as in like my mama used to be like, no sweets before noon. I'm like, I'm a whole adult now. And I just be like, 9 a.m., breakfast, ice cream. But I definitely get what you're saying. Like this idea that it's like, oh, I'm going to protect you by making you maintain this virginity while not offering the same level of protection to one's sons or even to the self.
Yeah.
This is usually where things, I think, go awry when we're talking about sexuality and sex, and we're bringing people's children into the mix of this conversation.
Yes.
Since this is part of the conversations that I do have with people, and I'm just like, this is not a do as I say, not as I do. That actually doesn't work. That if you want your child to go in the way that you want them to go, you have to also be living that life. You have to show it with your body. You can't just say it with your mouth. It's not enough.
Absolutely. And it certainly doesn't help you foster the closeness or the emotional intimacy with your child where she can come to you and have those discussions, I think. Who's going to want to do that with someone who's, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Like, especially if there's a checking to, you better still be a virgin. It's going to be kind of hard for her to get into a space where it's like, you know what? I'm ready to no longer be a virgin. I found someone that I care for, however, and I would like to have vaginal intercourse with this person. You have effectively closed the door to having that type of conversation, which actually made me question, what kind of conversations have you been having? You're saying that you're having these open conversations with your child, I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering, well, how open can the conversation be if it stops at you
Absolutely.
better not have sex?
Yes, absolutely. How much is her voice really truly expressed? How much is she actually talking with you and sharing with you versus following orders or trying to live up to your expectations?
Yeah. And all those things, they have an expiration date. And at the end of the day, and this is something that I do tell parents. What you want them to do is to make good choices for themselves. They are not
Absolutely.
you, and they cannot live your life.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a parent's responsibility, in addition to whatever school district they are in. And I
Yes.
recognize that school districts have different ideas of what they're going to share in sex
Yes.
education. But it is your job to make sure that they have as much information as
The
they can.
tools.
Number one, to take away the salaciousness of sex.
Yes.
Make that thing so mundane that they're not seeking it out so they can know what it is.
Right. And it doesn't, sex is not a bad thing. I think the connotation, the overarching theme was I want to make sure that she's not doing this bad thing. And
Yeah. And
it's
sex is
not a
not
bad thing.
bad.
It's not, it doesn't, I
It's
mean,
regular, it's every day. For me,
yes,
it's very
yes,
mundane because this is
yes.
what I talk about. But it should
Yes,
also, when it is mundane, when there are no secrets kept, number one, kids are not passing back and forth bad information when they're talking to parents. When they're talking to parents, parents are also able to impart values and not just basic information. You want to make sure
sure,
that your values are being imparted
sure.
and held within the space of this conversation. And the door has to be open, which means that you have to be okay with the fact that your kid is going to make decisions and choices for themselves. You
Mm-hmm.
can let them know what your wants is for them. But in the end of the day, they're going to be the one to live that life and have to make that decision. So you want them to have all the information that they can have. So both the good and the bad, because scaring people doesn't actually have long-term effect. But when kids have all the information that they need, and they tend to delay having sex, whereas people often think that if you don't say anything about it, if we keep our mouths closed and don't talk to them, that they're
Sweep
going
it
to
in the
not have sex.
closet.
And it has the
Yeah,
opposite effect, because
absolutely.
now it's titillating. It's this thing that they can't talk about with you, and oh, it must be something special and something wonderful if you won't tell me about it.
Yes,
So I'm going to go find out from my friends who don't know nothing, and I'm going to find out off TV and through watching porn, which that's not what you want, because these things are acting spaces, and sometimes acting spaces get conflated with real life. And
absolutely.
then they're more likely to actually go out and do, because here they are with all the wrong information and none of the values from their parents. And they actually do want to hear from their parents.
Yes,
No matter how embarrassed parents may be about having the conversation, kids want to learn from them.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I do think, um, you know, if this decision had been a wiser made decision or just a lot more conversation had been had around it, perhaps it wouldn't be shocking everybody in the nation right now with where he went left. All right, so let's move on to topic number 2 about where he went left. Dr. Donna, where do you think he went left next?
Without using Google or consulting the very, very, very many sex educators that are all over the interwebs. Because what he would have known is that virginity is a social construct
Yes.
based in patriarchy and ownership. And the checking for someone's virginity is
Hmm.
part of a problem.
It sounds like the doctor tried to, from what I've heard, and I wasn't there, so I can't say, but from what my understanding was, the doctor did try to educate around that checking for the hymen
Mm-hmm.
doesn't necessarily mean that that person is still a virgin and whatnot. And
Yeah.
although it's a little bit different, um, is a little bit different from what you're saying in talking about the
Yes.
patriarchal concept. My my point to say that was I think that hammers home what you were saying, because I think although there may have been some education, and again I wasn't there, but my understanding of what I heard and read, that there was some understanding or there was some explanation. It was he heard only what he wanted to hear. Like,
Exactly. The two concepts are connected.
Exactly.
So when I say that it's a social construct, it's a social construct much in the same way that gender is a social construct. It is to say how we're going to be treated or mistreated based on this idea of what something should be according to a very small group of people who made the decision, right? So virginity is a requirement in some ways for women to uphold, not for men to uphold. And women are judged based on whether or not they are virgins. And if once they move over to the space of not being virgins, so you're either a virgin or you're not. When you're not a virgin, now people are asking body count questions. How many people have you had sex with? Because the idea being that the more people that you've had sex with, the lower your value as a human being and as a woman and as a person that someone might want to partner with on a long-term or lifelong basis, the more that value diminishes.
Absolutely.
As though you can count a person's value in the number of sexual partners they had. So some people try to say, oh, it's about safety when they ask about numbers. If it was about safety, you would ask safety-based questions.
Yes.
Do you use condoms when you have sex with other people? Have you been tested? What are the results of those tests? You would not ask about someone's body count.
Yes.
And even to ask about someone's body count, now, this is my opinion. And I will say that some of my sexuality people, we are of the same mind in this. It is based on your insecurity, if you're asking that question. Generally speaking, a man's prowess has also been based in his sexuality. Can he perform sexually? Can he please a woman?
Yeah.
If you're, from a very heterosexual mindset. But can he please this woman?
Sure.
And if he cannot please this woman, his value diminishes, which means that the value of virginity goes up, because a woman who knows not what sex is supposed to be like is more likely to think that whatever whack sex she received is great.
Yes.
And he gets to keep his idea that he's the bomb.com. Now,
Absolutely.
A woman that has had many sexual partners probably has an idea of what pleases her sexually, and would be also able to rank this person about whether or not they were good or bad. And if they're bad, does that not threaten his manhood? So, I mean, that's, virginity as a social construct in a nutshell, as much as I can give.
Yes.
But this idea of the hymen stretches and changes throughout the course of a person's lifetime.
Absolutely.
So you cannot gauge virginity from it, because the hymen can also develop holes throughout one's life. Some people are born without a hymen at all.
Absolutely.
And even then, it's not a guarantee of virginity.
It's not.
Because we often think of virginity and sex through the
vaginal intercourse.
Exactly. Yeah. Vaginal intercourse. And sex is so much more than vaginal intercourse. There's anal, there's oral, there's digit.
Yes.
That's what I call it, digit sex. So when people use their hands, manual manipulation of the sexual organs. So we're missing out on a whole lot if we're just thinking about that. And hymens break or don't break for various reasons.
Yes.
And some of them are really non-sex related reasons. So like the doctor said, or he said that the doctor said, horseback riding, bike riding, strenuous exercise. These are reasons that a hymen can stretch or break, if you will.
Yes.
But it is no guarantee. I mean, even tampons can interfere.
Absolutely.
Sexual activity that she does with herself can interfere. So it's no guarantee that, number one, that she's not having sex, but it also means that the door is closed to what activity is being done. Because we're so fixated oftentimes on whether or not someone's going to get pregnant, as opposed to general health, sexual health. People are, and teens are, having anal sex and having oral sex with no protection, because everybody has been so focused on whether or not they're going to get pregnant. Now, you can't get pregnant from anal and oral, but what can happen is the passing of STIs. And there's a new strand of HIV that was just
Absolutely.
announced.
Absolutely.
They said that syphilis is getting harder to cure.
It is.
Gonorrhea, chlamydia, all of these are becoming more and more resistant to penicillin. So
Mm-hmm.
if we're talking about sexual health, let's talk about sexual health. The
Mm-hmm.
hymen and the sexual health, they have no relation.
Absolutely. And most importantly, the hymen belongs to her.
Yes.
I mean, I know we're kind of having this conversation, but at the end of the day, it's hers
Exactly.
and only hers.
Which means
Not,
this
yes,
idea that, sex is what a man does to a woman. We're
yes,
missing the bigger picture. We're
we
missing
are.
that there could be any number of things that she is doing that has nothing to do with her vagina. And we're also assuming heterosexuality.
We're doing that, but most importantly, uh, um, not just heterosexuality, but her feelings around it.
Mm-hmm.
Her feelings around sex and her body, I think, are the biggest things that stand out for me. Like, I love my parents. I do. But I would not uh, want them to know that much information about me without me openly sharing that with them. You know what I'm saying? Like on my terms. And my mother and my dad have both gone with me to the doctor, not to the OBGYN per se, but they've gone with me to the doctor when I've been really sick. And, even within that, I want to be able to have a say in how much information is released.
Yeah.
It's not mandatory. It's not like, okay, they have to come with me and they have to get that proof of,
Yes.
you know what I'm saying? Like,
And the demanding of proof
yes,
is part of the problem.
right.
But I think that if the point was to show that he has power over his household, then he has demonstrated very well that he has power over his household, not just from saying that you're going to give me back proof, doctor. You're going to confirm for me that the hymen is intact, but also in what happened later in that very same interview, this idea that he owns half of his wife's vagina.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, some people have said that this thing has been said in jest, but most jest has a kernel of truth. That's number one.
And
And
yeah,
number two, you can still tell jokes in poor taste.
yes, absolutely. And I think too, this revelation about the visit to the OBGYN coupled with joke or non-joke or whatever, I think the bigger picture is that it shows that there's no trust.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't trust that you're going to communicate openly with me about what's going on. Not just the ownership piece, but just the trust and the mutual respect,
Yeah.
or the boundaries. Just the boundaries, like, okay, I have the right not to, whatever. So,
And that's part of what I was worrying about. What is ultimately being taught here?
mm-hmm,
Because there are a great deal of people that do agree with this and think that this is what's best. This is how you protect your children.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
I'm like, this is not how you protect your children.
mm-hmm,
The best thing you can do is give them information, allow them to make decisions for themselves.
mm-hmm.
And if you have done a stellar job, and if your child feels comfortable, they are going to come to you. That's ultimately what you want. You want the door to be so wide open that they would come to you when they're ready for advice, for a condom, for whatever it is, or to come to you after it's happened so that they are being honest with you. But a child
Mm-hmm.
cannot be honest if there's a dictatorship about their own body.
Yes,
And
yes,
this especially comes up around this time of year. This is when many of my people are constantly, we're putting out these PSAs, if you will, that children don't owe anybody hugs.
oh
This
yeah,
is
yeah,
basic consent, that
yes,
their body belongs to them. But the
yes,
problem is that, or one of the problems that I've seen is that so many people don't believe that children own their bodies. They believe
mm-hmm,
that the children belong to them, that they're
mm-hmm,
property.
mm-hmm,
And because we're thinking of them as property, we're not also thinking about how we can train them up to know that their bodies are their own so that they are able to report back if somebody does something inappropriate.
Or give them
So
a voice to put a stop to it. A
exactly.
voice to say, you know what, no, that's not okay, or no, I don't like that, or no, you don't need to be touching me there.
Exactly. So when we're thinking about
Yes.
like children who are violated by
Mm-hmm.
adults, this it's also because conversations have been closed. Because parents are not wanting to teach about the proper names for their body parts. They want to call it cute things like cookie and purse. Now they done told you that someone touched their purse. You don't know what pocketbook they touched. You have no idea. So you have to make an
Right?
assumption. And you're
Absolutely.
going to assume that that uncle of yours that you love wouldn't touch them that way, but you have no idea.
And the conversation isn't safe to be had with you.
Exactly. And you haven't taught them that their body
Yeah.
belongs to them because you tell them that they owe hugs to this uncle
Yeah,
or that
yeah.
auntie, to this grandma, or to that family friend. That, oh, you hug them, give them a hug, give them a kiss. So
But no,
you've taken away
yeah,
ownership from their own bodies.
yeah,
So if someone should touch
absolutely.
them without their permission, they already don't have an idea that their body that they wear every day in, day out, belongs to them, and that they can tell people, stop, no, don't.
Or how to be touched appropriately. I think that's
Yes.
another thing.
That like I like gentle hugs.
Gentle hugs, or not only just touch. And I know that this conversation is about touch, but just about being able to pick out and being able to sense what kind of person you want close to you, emotionally closeness, because sex is physical, but there's also the emotional aspect of it too, and just learning how to screen people properly. And I think um that part kind of comes off to me too, with the whole like she can't do that. Well, are you teaching her how to screen men or women or whomever properly, that she allows to have access to that part of her when she's ready?
Exactly. And that is going to be part of a learning process. And she can't have the learning process if she doesn't have a process. If someone
Absolutely.
else is going to constantly hold the reins, and then it's one day she'll have the reins in her hand, but she'll have had no practice.
She's
And
gonna run amok.
exactly. Now she may run amok, or she may run in the quite the opposite direction
Yeah.
and remain chaste and have no clue what to do or how to even broach this conversation with potential love interests. People cannot just all of a sudden know how to do it, right? I mean, people talk about how they wish they had adulting classes. Like, where are the adulting classes?
Right.
And it's because they haven't been given, oftentimes we haven't been given the space to learn, to make those mistakes, to be able to have open dialogue about the mistake without someone saying, see, that's why I don't let you do nothing. So we're
Right.
not having the space to properly practice what we need to practice so that we
Right.
can be well-equipped adults who
Yeah.
can discern for ourselves who we do want close, who we
Right.
don't want close, whether or not we like certain touch or not, and what kind of interactions we ultimately want to have with other people and ourselves. So
And yeah,
we don't get to learn to trust our own judgment. We learn to
absolutely.
trust the judgment of others.
And we don't get to normalize whether especially for a young black girl, a young black woman, having sexual fantasies is very healthy. I believe I had Janae Johnson on, and she talked about how girls were referred to as grown or fast, and taught very early that to have those thoughts or those feelings, or just even wanting to have those desires, is being taught at a very young age that that's wrong, or that's just dirty, or just whatever, at a very early age. And I think, if we can learn anything from this, is that it's okay to want to have sex. It's okay to want to be curious about that. That's a natural part of life. When I was her age, I was probably a curious beaver myself, and I just, HBO or Skinamax or whatever. It's a
Skinamax, I remember Skinamax.
those things, you're running. It's okay to be curious, and it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to be attracted to somebody, and it's okay to, just have that. And I think, um,
I
I
think
don't
we're
know.
scared of it, mostly
Yes.
because we ourselves oftentimes, I mean, I've run into more adults than not who have not had proper sex education, right? And who have not necessarily wanted to go back and be like, let me go get all the sex education. I'm like, I get it. I do. But it makes us more scared. Oftentimes when we have more information, we get to be less scared because we
Yeah.
have more information. We have more to go on. So it's easy to be scared about the fact of children thinking about sex because
Absolutely.
because we are concerned about what it means from our adult minds. It does not mean the same from child minds.
Yes.
So children as young as in utero touch their genital
Absolutely.
parts because it feels good to do so. So if
Yes.
we're talking about pleasure while we're having these conversations, then we are taking away some of the
Yes.
salaciousness of everything and letting
Mm-hmm.
them know that you can give yourself this pleasure. You can
Yeah.
spend time with you.
Yep.
That you don't necessarily have to invite anybody else in, but we're not ready to have those conversations about masturbatory practices in kids.
Yes. Or
Instead, when
just,
we see a
yeah.
child with their hand in a diaper, we tell them that's dirty and we scold them or spank them. And we have now associated negativity with their genitals and shame. Negativity and shame has now been associated.
And also, too, I think even on a broader spectrum, Dr. Donna, and maybe you agree with this, I think it's just a disconnect from your body in general.
Yeah.
Because I've worked with a lot of women who feel like sex is awkward, or they check out, they dissociate, or they don't know how to tell their partner what they like versus what they don't like. And so there's a big disconnect or even a discomfort with just the actual act alone or just with knowing their bodies and stuff.
Yeah, because they've been taught that sex is not for them.
Yes.
It's what happens to them. It's not something that they should be a proper active participant in. And they
Yes.
certainly should have no knowledge of what it is that they like and do not like. Because
Absolutely.
now, if once you do, you have outed yourself as being fast.
Okay. Right on. All right. You, what's your next point of hot topics?
Honestly, I feel like that about covers it. It
Good.
really does.
Good. It was a lot, and I do feel like we've covered a lot, and I want to thank you so much for coming on here and having this conversation. And I know we're talking about the TI show and his daughter, but I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there who've wrestled with this.
Yeah.
Or who've experienced this, right? He was just the one who made the announcement publicly and it went viral from there. Do you have any recommendations for parents who are also struggling with this and they want to maybe figure out how to do it right or maybe do it better for their children or to have those conversations? What do you recommend?
I recommend number one, getting into a space where you've examined your own values and thoughts around sex and sexuality
Mm-hmm.
so that you are moving into a space where you're able to open up that door and have those conversations. So Sex Talk Parent Edition, it's a webinar that I offer for parents to take it at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And it does have a workbook component so that you can actually work it out, whether or not you are parenting with someone or you're parenting alone. It talks about how to build up that tribe of people that your kid can go to have these conversations with that you know are going to get the type of information and instill the same type of values that feel comfortable for you and that are right along the same line of where you would like them to be.
Mm-hmm.
So Sex Talk Parent Edition, I will make sure that your people get a very special discount.
Okay.
Because more than anything, I want people to have these conversations.
Absolutely.
Another resource is Sex Positive Families.
What is
Now,
that?
they
A
give
book?
all manner
Okay.
of information.
Okay.
It is run by one of my sexual colleagues. Her
Okay.
name is Melissa, or their name is Melissa. They are on Instagram and Facebook, but they're sexpositivefamilies.com.
Okay.
It lists a multitude of resources that can be used to sort of open the door to having these sort of conversations so that you can have a more sex positive family.
Absolutely. Okay, great. And the webinar that you mentioned in the first one, where can they go to find that?
sextalkparentedition.com.
Okay, great. And I'll be sure to get all those links from you and put those in the show notes. Any last thoughts before we stop here, Dr. Donna?
Just want to remind everyone that virginity is a made up social construct that, and that we don't want people to believe that their value as human beings is based only in their genitals. So let's make sure that we're having these conversations so that we're not repeating these type of mistakes.
Absolutely. And also too, just to kind of, piggyback on you, your genitals are just that. Yours. Yes. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so you've heard what we've had to say. I would love to know what your thoughts are on the show. What do you think? Do you think, do you think T.I. was right, wrong? Where do you think his daughter stands in all this? Does it bring up other thoughts for you that perhaps maybe Dr. Donna and I didn't get to discuss? Love to know how you think and feel about this topic. And then also to just hit me up on an email. You know the email, adatewithdarkness@gmail.com. Also in the show notes. Please hop on over and join our Facebook group, A Date with Darkness Facebook group. And I will see you guys next time on this show. And I thank you guys so much for hanging in there with me and spending this last hour with us. And hope to see you and hear from you. Until next time, be well.